Jim, welcome to Skid Marks Podcast and everybody else listening, all
good
two
day.
of you out there.
Good day.
I am Jeff McGrath. I'm an accident reconstructionist and forensic car accident investigator. My background is I'm a retired police officer, vehicular crimes detective, and now I run a private company. And Jim, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, my name is Jim Archer. I'm a retired homicide detective, and I got expertise in lots of different kinds of things, different kinds of investigations, homicide, arson. I was a PIO, which is Public Information Officer, a Neighborhood Resource Officer. I could go on, but I'm not going to spew my whole resume.
You have quite the background.
I let everybody else assume that, but I do own Intuitive Research Group, and Mr. McGrath and I are actually partnered as two separate companies working on the same cases.
I am 3 Laws Recon Investigations, and Jim is IRG, or Intuitive Research Group. Today, Jim, we're going to talk about, there's two things I'd like to talk about. One is we have an accident in Salt Lake City that I wanted to discuss where the person that struck the vehicle we're going to talk about, he survived this.
Okay.
And it was touch and go. I guess he was in surgery and they weren't sure he was going to make it. But I'm also going to talk about the difference between living and surviving in a car accident because there are some things that people need to understand. Most of it's physics, and I'm not going to sit here and bore the world with physics, but we'll talk about it as we discuss this accident. This one, as I said, involves two vehicles in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Wow, that AC came on.
Holy mackerel.
Oh, well.
Sounds like a UFO's on the roof. Shit.
That's almost overwhelming. I
It
think.
really is.
Well, we'll just go ahead.
Okay.
You know, if we get any complaints, the audience will tell us.
Yeah, all right. In the future, we'll make sure that AC unit doesn't kick
And
on.
it's February. Why is the AC coming on?
Well, we live in Phoenix.
Oh, that's true.
Hey, we can't complain most of the year, though, right?
It's only hot between January and February.
Yeah, that's
Or,
right.
I mean, cold between January and February.
Right. So today we have it's a Ford Astra van. It's a minivan that's used for a company for, I think, deliveries or something to that effect. And the time of morning this happened in Salt Lake City, it was still dark. The sun wasn't up yet. So there is a flatbed trailer semi that the semi driver parked in the middle of the roadway. To describe this roadway, it's 2 lanes each way, and let's call it north and southbound. There's a inside lane, which we call the number 1 lane, then there's the curb lane, which is the number 2 lane.
Okay.
For both directions. And then the center has what's called a 2-way left turn lane, or a suicide lane, if you will. Mm-hmm. Traffic can pull into there to make a left. I've seen traffic pull in there as like a safety refuge when they're getting ready to try to cross traffic to get to the other side. And I've also seen construction vehicles utilize these, and they pull their semi into these spots because they're going to offload their equipment that's too large to pull into the job site.
Right in the middle of the road.
Right in the middle of the road. But they're supposed to be careful. There's things they're supposed to do.
Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
As a former motor officer, is it kosher or legal for a construction vehicle to park in that yellow lane in the center of the road to offload?
Well, I dealt with this in our city because there was a lot of construction going on, and you know, our unit was split on that. We had some of the guys going, "No, that's bullshit. Let's get them out of the road. They got to go somewhere else." I looked at it this way: you look at the job site they got to pull into. This is a 53-foot trailer with a semi tractor attached to the front of it. So
Big truck.
you got 70 plus feet on this thing. Now, they can't get into the job site, or if they can get in, now they got to back out into traffic. That's going to create more of a hazard, in my opinion. So I'm going to avoid coming back there to clean up a wreck later. So if they're going to pull into that center lane safely and utilize it safely, I don't have an issue with that. And that's just where I stand on it. Legally, I mean, yeah, I couldn't cite the law right now that says they can or can't do it, but that's personally how I'm going to look at it.
So it's kind of a discretionary thing.
It is discretionary, and most of the traffic laws out here where we are, a lot of them are discretionary. You know, they're on view. An officer has to see it take place. So somebody could call in with hey, there's a speeder on my road, and here's his plate number. Well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Okay.
We have to actually see it. So, and that's with most violations. But in this case, the truck is, let's just say the truck pulls into the center 2-way left turn lane, and he's facing northbound. And now the Astra van is coming southbound. And I could have my directions off, but let's just play it that way.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Really.
And the Astrovan's coming down in the number 1 lane, which would be the high-speed lane, the one closest to the middle, furthest away from the curb.
Okay.
So he's traveling in the number 1 lane. And he leaves his truck running, as they all do. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, it's dark. So he's got his headlights on. So his headlights, well, based on what I've read, he does.
Okay.
Now, that's just his statements. I don't know exactly what the police saw when they got there. I haven't really gotten into that much of it. As far as the semi goes, I got into what the vehicle that was hit. So the Astrovan's traveling down the road, and I have his ACM, which is the airbag control module. That is people refer to that as the black box in a car.
Okay, I can kind of see your computer screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah,
here?
well enough.
All right.
Just describe it well.
What it is the airbag control module, or black box. It senses when you're having a collision. And once that collision starts, it goes back, and it's always recording, but it's asleep. It goes back and it captures the last 5 seconds prior to that airbag deployment or non-deployment, depending on what the box wants it to do.
Okay.
In this case, it deployed the airbags because it needed to. Because 5 seconds before, we have a vehicle at 43 miles per hour.
I see.
We have at 4 seconds, counting down, 3, 2, 1 to impact, 43 miles an hour. It doesn't change. It stays consistent. The engine RPM stay consistent, 1,408 revolutions per minute.
Okay.
That engine's cranking. It doesn't change either. Percentage of throttle stays at 5%. That's typical of somebody who's just got up to speed. You're maintaining your speed. You're just kind of feathering the gas pedal, and you're moving along. There's nothing in front of you. So
does that tell you if the cruise control is on?
The ACM does tell me if the cruise control is on, and this is about a 40-page document, and without boring the audience going through all that, I'll just fast forward and say the cruise control is not on in this situation.
Okay.
This is manual. But it also tells us if the brake was being used. That means, did he go off the gas pedal to push the brake? And that captures 8 seconds back, and the entire 8 seconds up to impact, there's nothing on the brake.
Not a thing.
So what we have is we have a person driving down the road, and we call it fat, dumb, and happy. He doesn't realize there's anything going on. All of a sudden, boom, he's right into something.
So he hit the back of this. Was it a forklift?
It was a forklift. I'm sorry, I didn't even get into that.
Okay.
What the driver of the truck offloaded off this semi was a forklift, and it's a big forklift, and I'll show a picture of it here in just a minute.
Okay.
But it's the kind of forklift that's got the boom arm that runs across it, and then the drop down up to the forks. So it potentially could hold a lot of weight, and they get up pretty high. They're used for large construction sites.
Okay, so it's got an extendable boom on it, and he rear-ended that thing solid at 43.
He rear-ended the actual counterweight on the rear.
Okay.
And if you can imagine, that thing is solid steel. It's not moving. Well, when the tow truck driver got hit, it's probably like a fly hitting the windshield. He jumps off this thing and sees...
The tow truck driver or the forklift driver?
I'm sorry, the forklift driver,
okay.
Not a tow truck. I'm thinking there was a tow truck later.
There usually is.
But the forklift driver, which is also the semi-driver, he's the operator of the forklift. He pulls that, and he's actually driving in the number 1 lane, gonna cross into the number 2 lane, 'cause he's crossing over into the dirt to get into the job site. Well, he gets hit in the number 1 lane by this Ford Astrovan at 43 miles an hour. He jumps off. The van driver is already out of the vehicle, on the ground, flopping around like a fish out of water. What they said in the report was he was having a seizure. Well, this was a significant impact, and I'm going to show you right here, and maybe we can try to zoom in on this later. But if you go up here, you can see the driver of the minivan is not buckled. And then we have this, it says maximum SDM recorded velocity change in miles per hour. To put that in simple terms, we'll call it a delta V. It's a sudden change in velocity.
Wow.
So you're traveling 43 miles an hour and you hit a wall that comes to a complete stop. You have a change in velocity of 43 miles an hour.
Not only that, you said he was not buckled in, but he at least had an airbag.
He's lucky he had an airbag, because what this recorded was a negative 32 mile an hour change in velocity. Sudden change in velocity of 32 miles an hour. That's because the forklift absorbed some of it.
So that's the difference between the speed and whatever that forklift absorbs,
whatever
it
energy.
reduces down to 32.
Correct.
And he's hitting that airbag at 32 miles an hour.
At 32 miles an hour, he's going into that airbag to a sudden stop.
Damn.
That's typically lethal. And when we teach this, we teach that usually a delta V, a sudden delta V of negative 30 or greater is usually fatal, because your internal organs won't survive that.
They're the ones that are crashing into the side of your body, your rib cage. Okay.
All that. Yeah. Usually it severs your aorta, which is your heart attached to your heart muscle, which is not elastic, but it stretches to the point it tears it.
Right.
You bleed out in seconds. This guy, he survived, like I said, and at a negative 32, it's unbelievable to me. The airbag extended the impulse, meaning instead of a sudden stop, if you jump off a 3-story building and you hit the ground, it's a sudden stop. That's about a negative 30 delta V.
Right.
So this is the equivalent of jumping off a 3-story building. Now you put a small airbag in between that jumper and the ground, it slows the impulse, or it extends the impulse. So it slows that process of sudden stop. That's what saved this guy's life.
I see.
And that's how airbags save lives in cars. Seatbelt also slows that. So usually if you have both of them working, the seatbelt and the airbag, this guy probably wouldn't even have been in surgery.
Okay. So didn't you say earlier that he may have been having a seizure?
They said it was a seizure, but they said it was an accident-induced seizure. In my entire career, I've never seen that. I've seen people, we call it circle in the drain when you get there, because they're pretty much we've had them where the fire department won't even waste the jet fuel for the helicopter, because they're like, no, this guy's not going to make it.
That's our morbid on scene.
Well, we have to be
gallows humor, as they call it.
It's not we're making light of any situation. Right. We're just saying that sometimes that's reality.
And that's the way it is with cops. You joke about things to reduce your own pain.
Absolutely.
And that's
you have
one
to.
of them.
You have to. I mean, all the death that you and I have seen, we have to do something about it, because I couldn't go home and live with this. But nonetheless, so this is the information that the airbag control module provided us. The Salt Lake Police Department, the specialized vehicular crimes team, they're called the CART team. They did a reconstruction of this, and they did a really good job.
Good.
A fantastic job. But the issue was this forklift lawfully in the roadway with the proper lighting at the time of night or morning it was? And that's the argument we're having right now, is should the van driver have seen this forklift? The forklift had an orange rotating beacon on the roof. So you can picture this orange light circling around.
Okay.
Amber. It also had a big bright white light on the rear of it that would just it illuminates the rear of it, I guess, so this thing's backing up, it sees things. But there's no tail lights on this thing. There's nothing like that.
So it's not a road vehicle.
No, it's not a road vehicle. And it's in the road. And it's dark. And this guy's traveling down the road at 43, and he smacks into it without even, from what I can tell, without even seeing it. So, it was significant. And if you see, if I can get to the actual forklift, what we're showing here. Sorry, we got all kinds of noises going on.
It's just the office building we live in.
The office building we live in. Yeah. It's not a very good recording studio, but
no.
It'll do. So, I apologize, I had these marked, and then I got, right as we hit record. As you can see here, there's a semi, and then you can see it's parked in this double yellow line gore area, if you will, that's not designed for through traffic. Right. So it's kind of safe there. But now if you see, and I can see in this picture right here, the headlights are on.
Okay.
So
that answers that.
Yeah. So this vehicle's traveling this way with these headlights in his eyes. And there's one white light beacon on this trailer that's at the end of this 70 plus feet, and an orange beacon on top of it. That's kind of high off the ground, and I would like to run some tests, because I know I did in reconstruction school with the instructor. They ran some tests where they hung a light from like a tree branch.
Okay.
And as you're driving up, you're a mile away from it. Can you tell where that is? Can you tell what it is? Can you tell how tall it is? And you can't. Your human brain cannot process. It looks like it's 8 feet off the road, but it's actually right there in the curb, in the lane that you're traveling. Those are some of the focal issues that we have driving at nighttime. The reason your cars have taillights and semis have lights around the outside perimeter of the rear of them is so you can get a concept of where each end of that is. So if there's one light in the middle, like a motorcycle, it doesn't need them on each side because that's as wide as it is.
Right.
But a car and a semi does, because you need to see what size is that. Because your brain is calculating as you're approaching this thing, it's calculating how large that picture is growing. So it starts out as a small, 2-inch thing down the road, and as you get closer, it's growing because you're getting closer to it. Your brain eventually hits a mode where it goes, "Oh, you're too close," and sometimes that's too late if
right.
the vehicle stopped.
Because your response time is delayed.
It takes the average person that's not impaired about 1.5 seconds to perceive and react to something. And that means you go, "Oh shit, there's something in the road." And then your foot goes from the gas pedal to the brake, or you turn the steering wheel, or both. And that's usually about 1.5 seconds. That's pretty good. It can be up over 2 seconds at nighttime because you have other stimulus going on. But that's typically how it works. So
right.
If you're at 43 miles an hour, I think we determined that vehicle is traveling 63 feet per second. So at 5 seconds,
5 seconds back from the point of impact would be
when the AE, the algorithm enable of that box says, go back and capture 5 seconds.
Right.
It was 315 feet back.
So more than a football field.
Just over a football field. And
that's quite a distance.
It is quite a distance.
For a driver.
And if I'm a forklift driver, I'm going to see those headlights down the road and go, I got plenty of time to pull out, thinking maybe they're going to see me if I don't get out of the lane in time.
Do you have a picture of the forklift?
I do.
Because there we go. So what I'd be asking is, with all that boom and all that other crap in the way, could he see?
Well, he could see behind him,
but he can't see to the right of him.
Can't see to the right of him, and we know he was hit. This back here is the counterweight for this thing, and we know he hit it on the right side of it, so he'd have been on the opposite side. So we know he's angled.
Okay, so what you see on the counterweight, the driver of the van hit that counterweight. Jeez.
Look at that.
Wow. Hit that counterweight dead on.
Yep.
From the right side.
Yes.
So you can pretty much say that forklift was going to the right.
And I don't know if you can see in this picture right here, but do you see these little white stripes painted on the road?
Yep.
That's the trajectory of the actual forklift.
Okay.
So he's coming from this lane, he's getting in here, so he's angled. So that's why you have this crease, because it's the corner of the counterweight, and I'll show you that in a second.
Dead nuts.
That is a major impact.
Holy God.
What you see here, this is the path of the forklift.
It's, just looking at that picture, you wonder how you survived.
Yeah. I've seen less where people have not survived. Entire families. Here's the counterweight.
Yep.
Actually, so he strikes it along here. This pops his radiator when he hits it. This is the fluid you're seeing here. But that's pretty. This is a solid steel thing. You might as well hit a wall.
Right. Yeah.
He came to a sudden stop. And the thing, how this works is the vehicle experiences the sudden stop. The vehicle experiences the negative 32 miles per hour delta V, change in velocity.
And its body is still going at 43.
Everything inside that vehicle that's not bolted down is still traveling 43 miles an hour.
Okay, yeah, because, it makes it sound as if when you're come to that 32 mile an hour stop, the body does too, but it doesn't. The vehicle does. And the rest of you continues forward at the speed you were traveling.
Yeah, there's more than one collision. There's the collision of the vehicle and the object. Then there's the collision of the body against whatever else is inside.
In this case, it's the airbag and the firewall.
Yeah, and then you can count a third collision. It's your organs against your rib cage.
Okay.
So these are usually not survivable. This is a serious collision. So as we work this through, I can see what Salt Lake Police Department did, and they did an exceptional job on this reconstruction. I mean, I'm actually impressed. I don't see them that good here where we are sometimes. And
you can't qualify it all the time.
Not all the time. There's some. I just testified in court on one the other day that they said, I actually said they did a really good job.
Good.
But in this one, they did a fantastic job. Now, they cited the crane or the forklift operator.
For what?
For having an unsafe vehicle on the roadway.
Now, where we are, generally speaking, the person who rear ends any vehicle would be cited for failure to control a vehicle to avoid an accident.
Absolutely. That's our
So-
Title 28701A. The
701A.
standard rear end. The vehicle that rear ends another vehicle is usually Unit 1. Usually. Now, there are exceptions, like this one. This is a dark road. He's got headlights in his eyes. He's got a bright light on this thing that's just right in the middle. Do you know where this thing really is, what it is? You can't. And you can't perceive and react if you don't perceive.
And it doesn't sound like he perceived much of anything because he had a continuing 43 miles an hour with no deviations. He hit the back of that thing without stopping, without any kind of change.
Yep.
So we, or at least I, would assume that he had no conception of what was in front of him. He didn't see any of the bright lights in the middle of the lane. He didn't see any action in front of him and didn't see any of the hazard lights or warnings outside of that whole thing. So he probably was not aware.
I believe, based on what this airbag control module tells me, that he didn't even know he hit anything.
Granted that, yeah, I would say that.
Yep.
So,
Until he woke up and hurt in surgery or out of surgery and they told him you've been in an accident.
and in terms of what the construction guys did, well, there's just one guy. It doesn't sound like there's anything different that he did there in that city than anything that we would see within our own jurisdictions here.
Correct,
So-
which we have. But I can count on one hand, I can count on 3 fingers how many times in my career I've seen zero. I mean, the ACM tells me there was zero reaction. There was no evasive action. There's a lot of times where there's no evasive action, but you can see the RPMs will drop off. You can see that a foot will, the throttle percentage will back up, that type of thing. There's oftentimes there's no braking into a collision, but in this situation where it stayed consistent all the way up through the crash, that I can count on, like I said, less than 3 fingers.
That's hard to do without having cruise control on.
It is. It really is, because you're going to naturally react.
Right.
There's something in front of you. You can't avoid moving your leg muscle to get off the gas.
Even if you're completely aware of your surroundings, if you're looking straight ahead, sometimes your foot is going to make it's a butterfly movement or
Yeah.
a slight deviation or something.
We always see, between 5%, 10%, could be 30% to 40%, because you're fluctuating. You're up a mile an hour, you're down a mile. You're trying to maintain a speed.
Yeah.
It does look like, this guy was good, and either that or he was stone solid and he wasn't moving. But he went right into this thing.
It's weird that you would see somebody who had a quote-unquote seizure and he didn't bury the accelerator.
Well, that was my question, and I talked to the attorney, and we have extensive medical records. The seizure didn't start till after the impact.
Okay.
So, because my concern was, did he have a seizure before? And yeah, you would see that. Sometimes you'll see that throttle percentage go from 5 to 100%, and steering kind of get erratic, that type of thing. This is just bizarre. He never ever saw this.
Going back to that forklift, what was unsafe about that vehicle?
Well, according to Utah state law, traffic law, it says that each vehicle, and we have the same kind of code here. It's a little different, but it's basically the same. It says that each vehicle has to be equipped with certain lights, certain color lights, and they have to be in certain places on the vehicle.
Right.
In this case, it didn't, because it's not a road vehicle. It's a construction site vehicle. But they do utilize it on the road when they have to offload this and get it into job sites. Doesn't mean they could drive it up to Circle K or they could drive it to to lunch, but because it's an unsafe vehicle,
Right.
It's doesn't have the proper lighting equipment,
And it's not even a farm implement.
It's not a farm implement, which they can drive those on the road. 14-year-olds can drive those on the road out here.
Pretty much anywhere,
And
too.
if there's an accident, they're just they got the big combine on the road. They're allowed to do it. Probably see that more in Indiana, but we have it out here quite a bit.
Right.
But yeah, so this is what not to do in a crash. Is you don't want to. Well, actually, I don't know how you could avoid this, because if you don't see it, you don't see it. There's nothing you can do. But put your damn seatbelt on, because this guy probably could have prevented some life-threatening surgeries.
Not only that, I wouldn't want to drive around and listen to that seatbelt bing bong go off all the time. That would just,
and I've done it, and I just wait till it goes off, but it takes a long time.
comes back on.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
We used to disengage those in the police cars with the pattern, turn the wheel left, turn the car on, off 3 times.
But nobody knows that trick.
Yeah, well, because when I first started as a cop, they said, do not wear your seatbelt because in case you had to get out really fast.
Oh, there's been times I hung myself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Trying to get out.
Try to run out with your seatbelt on, and that new policy came in. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there on my motorcycle, and the chief had this policy saying, you will wear your seatbelt. And all us older guys were like, that's kind of hard. Well, I was on my motorcycle, and here comes the chief. Oh, and you couldn't use your cell phone while you're driving. Right. And here comes the chief through an intersection, no seatbelt, on the computer in the car, and cell phone. So I knocked on his door in the eye and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know what I observed. And
your policy is being violated by yourself. That's right.
You violated your policy. But yeah, that's the Utah forklift. I don't know what more to say about it other than that was a really bad one.
Well, what's your next step in this whole thing?
My next step right now is I will have a consult with the law firm and explain to them all the pros and cons of this thing. Do I think the police cited properly in this? I do, because it's the forklift. He did get hit. He was involved in a collision. I'm sure he hopefully saw the car 300 feet down the road. Mm-hmm. And the lighting equipment during that time of night. Now, there's OSHA rules, too. I'm sure there's got to be flags around this truck, and there's got to be all kinds of markers and stuff. And from what I can see in these pictures, there was nothing like that. Or a flagman.
Exactly. I would be curious to see what OSHA would require as a standard, because you got one guy. You got just the truck driver who's also the forklift driver who's offloading. He's doing all this kind of stuff. Is he wearing a vest? Has he got another flagman there? Should he have another flagman there? Was he wearing a seatbelt? You don't know. Or do they have seatbelts?
Do they have seatbelts?
I don't know.
Right.
Those are questions that, I would like to see the OSHA rule.
Yeah.
For that. That's some really great reading, I'm sure.
So, oh my gosh, put me to sleep. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be my next step. Is we're going to be going through the OSHA rules. We're going to be talking to the attorneys. The lighting equipment. Yeah, it was improper. But does when it happens over and over and over, does that set precedent? Does that make it okay? Do you cite one guy after you've let 100 go?
Well, what about, why didn't they cite the guy who rear-ended him?
To my knowledge, they said he never saw it.
Does that make it right?
Well, no.
I mean, generally, we would cite him.
And here,
generally,
where we are, we would cite, I'm going to say 90% of the time we're going to cite that guy. And the reason being is because our law not only says you have to control the speed of your vehicle to avoid colliding with anything, but it says with anything, any conveyance on, adjacent to, or within the roadway.
Yeah, I mean, if you hit a pole.
If you hit a pole, you hit a fire hydrant. You hit a bus stop. You hit a manhole cover that just popped up, and you had time to stop for it. That's what we're going to look at. Did you have time to see it and react? Mm-hmm. Could you see it? In this case, they did not cite the van driver. But now let's back up a little bit. This van driver, he's undocumented. He's what they would used to call an illegal alien. He's from Mexico. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean he's doing anything. He's a wrong person. He's working. He works for this company doing deliveries. He doesn't have a driver's license, or he's suspended. Didn't have a license, and his license privilege is suspended. And I don't think the vehicle was registered.
Oh, wow. So we got a lot of different factors there. And when you go to cite somebody like that, you got to figure, is he going to show up for court? What's his address? And then because you have to put something in the citation. And if you've got no information,
right,
you don't even at this point know if that's his real name that he's giving you.
Right.
So if you don't have an address, where do you cite him? Where does the information to the court go to?
Yeah, and it's not fair to book this guy into jail and hold him until court, because you'd have to do that with everybody.
And then you could say, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Well,
but in practical terms, you've got all these things that are up against you. They're stacked against the officer or the application of that law.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because what did we learn in the academy? There's two things to the law, right?
Right.
There's the letter of the law.
The spirit of the law.
And the spirit of the law. So the letter of the law says, yes, you do this. The spirit of the law says, let me think about this. How many times did we see a transient, a homeless guy, commit some violation that would be not worthy of booking into jail, but a citation?
Right.
And we go, you know what? I'm not gonna cite you because you don't have a home address. Mm-hmm. You're not going to show up for court. You're just going to gather these warrants, unless it was something serious in nature or some type of a detriment to society. But they typically weren't. So that's why officers have discretion.
Exactly. And I know you and I usually exercise that discretion unless told otherwise.
A lot.
A lot.
And if I was told or directed to issue a cite, that takes my discretion away. That's a violation of my rights.
True. And using your discretion makes for a better officer.
It does make for a better officer. Now, unless you're one of those officers that just doesn't cite anybody. And in the citation, and I used to educate people when I'd stop them in a traffic stop for speed or whatever it may be. Because a citation, everybody doesn't deserve a ticket.
Right.
A ticket is designed to change driving behaviors. The whole traffic stop is designed to change driving behaviors. If I think I've done it just by stopping them and making contact with them, then so be it. I'll let them on their way. If I've stopped them and I'm still getting some problems and some attitude and I don't think they got it, yeah, they're going to get a ticket. Their attitude's going to judge how my attitude's coming out.
Now, as a motor officer, did you ever issue a written warning?
I've never in my career issued a written warning.
Okay. I used to.
We had officers that would do that to track them. I gave warnings every day. I stopped cars all day long, and I didn't write written warnings because if I'm giving you a warning, why am I going to write it down? If I'm going to write it down, it's a ticket.
I saw that as a customer service thing.
It's very nice.
I give you a written warning instead of a written ticket. That's an education.
And I agree with that.
And I document what I've done.
And I personally have received a written warning by our highway patrol out here when I was going to California one day, and I deserved a ticket. The officer used his discretion, and he wrote me a warning. And he said, I'm sorry, I have to write any warnings I give, I have to write them down because there was an issue with improprieties and stuff like that going on. So they had to document every stop. Well, all my stops were documented because every stop I made was cleared over the radio. And that's recorded. And so if I, Arizona license plate 123 ABC at this location, that's documented.
I preferred, especially towards the end of my career, within the past 5 years before I retired, to issue written warnings because it's documenting you're showing your actions, because I didn't at that time have a body worn camera.
No, we didn't.
And I didn't have a camera inside the car.
Nope.
But I did have an audio recorder.
I did too.
And I used that, and I used them with the written documentation, whether it was a ticket or a written warning, to show what actions I took. Or I use a field interview card.
And I think that's an outstanding practice because there are times where you'll give somebody a warning, and let's say I do a verbal warning, and I say, hey, listen, slow down. It's your driving was unsafe, or I believe it was not reasonable and prudent for this roadway. And just slow down, have a nice day, and then somebody will inevitably call in a complaint.
Yeah.
And now they want to complain because this officer wasted their time. Well, I've stopped so many cars. Now they go, well, do you remember this stop? No, red Mustang. Okay, I stopped 4 of those today.
Right.
So,
and that's a good reason to knock or to write something down.
That's a great practice.
So that's the evident practice that I got into.
Any new officers out there on the road, I would say, don't follow my lead. I would say, write it down.
Right.
Always write it down. And whenever in doubt, write it down. If they don't need a ticket, they need a written warning, that's fine. Write it down. Put your notes on there. That way you can always recall it.
Right. Exactly. It's the same thing as writing a report.
Absolutely.
If you go to court in 3 years over a red Mustang, at least you have some basis for that complaint or stop.
I've had to do that.
Right.
Or my report says saw a red car and pulled it over at 60. I mean, you got to do a little more than that. So
saw drunk, arrested, same.
That's right. There's times we get lazy.
Yeah.
Every cop out there can, anyone that says they haven't been, they're lying.
Right.
But for the most part, most of us, we wanted to do the right thing, and I always thought giving somebody a warning was a good day for them.
Yeah.
So
especially when they admitted to doing something wrong. Sorry, officer, I was speeding, or I didn't see the stop sign.
Yeah,
blah blah blah.
Right.
All right. Well,
right.
That's a gimme.
So. Okay. Well, Jim, I think next case we'll talk about is going to be a little more dramatic, I believe.
Good.
But for today,
just to do it.
We'll do it. Let's call it. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Skid marks.
Out.